Hi, Shira Averbuch. I
Hi.
just like emphasize my ch on there just to like prove I have it.
I know you do.
How are you, love?
I'm great. I'm great. The sun is in my face. I'm seeing you, so it's a good
The
day.
plants are just like a beautiful mirror to the green that you're wearing. If anybody's deciding to tune into the YouTube, it's just like a very Zen garden feel I'm feeling.
I try. It's the only one that's been surviving. Everything else around me is dead.
Okay,
So
great. So then I'm not alone because I feel like I've just been slowly murdering off all my plants.
that's what happens.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, I this is like a new plant journey for me, and I was determined. I jumped in full on. I bought six, and I was like, "Y'all are gonna live." And it's been an interesting moment to really grapple with your own humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can only do what you can do, and then try again.
and just keep reinvesting and hope. There's some people though, I swear, that have these beautiful green thumbs, and they just. It's like you walk into a botanical garden in their home, and you're like, "It's winter. How are you doing this?"
I don't know. They have a secret conversation with the plants.
I think that might be it. Just like really communicating with them and being like, please live, like live for me. Yeah. Anyway, for anybody who's listening who does not know you, who are you today?
I am a spiritual being in this universe and a singer-songwriter, actor. I call my music fairy folk.
Very
And
true. Yes.
that genre doesn't exist, but I think if you listen to my music, you'll be like, "Oh, that's correct," like you
Yes.
just did. Um, and and that's it. That's it for today.
Great. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so excited to dive into whatever this conversation will turn into. Um, Shira and I met doing a was it like even the stage reading was just more like a reading of a
Concert
concert.
reading.
Yeah, and Shira came into rehearsal. I thought she had been a part of this project forever because in our first rehearsal, you just like slayed the song that I was like just learning as though you had known it and it was in your blood for the rest of time. And it was like, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. This girl is insanely talented and also like obviously has been a part of the project. And you're like, no, 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 this is my first day. And I was like, I'm gonna excuse myself and leave the room.
And I saw you and I was like, this one is going to be my friend. And I said, we should meet for coffee.
Yeah.
And I'm Israeli. So when I say that, I mean it.
Yeah.
And then now we're friends.
Literally that. I mean, it was one of the most honestly, in my heart, I feel like I operate like this. And then, growing up in New York, like I have that directness, but then I also understand that I'm American and I can't maybe be like as far. I mean, maybe I mean, I am. I think I'm learning to just forget those norms and just do what I want to do in that way. But
Exactly.
when you were like, let's be friends, I was like, oh my God, I've been wanting friends. Yes, please. And you were like, great, let's go for coffee. I was like, amazing, let's go for coffee, as we always have those conversations. And then you were like, no, like, when are you free? It's like, oh, okay. Like, are you free tomorrow? Yeah, yep, we'll be there. And then it was that. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. And I feel like what a wonderful lesson for all of us to remember that, like, what's the worst that happens? Somebody says
Yeah.
no, and then they were going to say no anyway at some point. So, like, why not just get it over with?
Exactly.
I
Save
love,
some time and
yeah.
heart energy and all
Yeah.
that.
And also, like, learn who actually really wants to from the start.
Exactly.
Well, with that said, I I'm curious how you came up with the fairy folk phrasing, but the journey towards your fairy folkness, your songwriting in that world for yourself, how did this whole journey begin besides you just being born with like the gift of God through your vocals?
So I studied musical theater in college. I went to AMDA and then the new school. They have this joint program, and I got my BFA. And then I just started auditioning. And through my whole time in school and after, I felt like I don't belong anywhere, and everybody's trying to put me in different boxes, and nothing really fits completely.
Did you not feel like you belonged because of what people were telling you, or you just couldn't find a space that you felt safe?
Probably both.
Okay.
Probably both. Like, my voice was always a little different. I'm very tall. I look white, but I don't feel white to people. It's like all this things together.
Yeah.
And I'm very opinionated and all of that. So when I got out there, I auditioned a lot, and I didn't get anything for a while. And then it was like nothing, 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 something big, nothing, 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 something big. That's how it always was. And then I got my first big thing, which was my off-Broadway debut in a new musical called Solitary Light. And the musical was written by Paul Carbonara, which was Blondie's music director and guitar player for like 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, and he toured with her around the world, came back home to New York, and was like, I want to write a folk musical, which is incredible. And it's on Spotify, and you should listen to it because it's just like gorgeous folk music. And the story was about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, where 142 women died in a factory fire in New York because there weren't the right conditions to get out if they needed to. And I was the lead, and we worked together, me and Paul, and we really like deeply connected. And at some point in the run, he's like, "Do you write music?" And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, yes, but nobody's heard it before." And he's like, "Well, I want to hear it."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." So he's like, send me something. And I said, "Well, I don't have anything recorded." He's like, "Okay, great. Come to my studio in Brooklyn and just play me the songs," which at the moment sounded like the most terrifying thing in the world. But I went and I sat with him, and I played one song. It's like quiet, doesn't say anything. He's like, "Play me another." Okay, he hates it. Oh my God. I play another again. Silence. Play me another. And this goes on for about 5-6 songs. And then he goes, "You know, I was kind of not looking forward to the end of the run because I don't know what I'm doing next, but I know now I'm going to produce your album. That's what's going to happen." And we've been musical partners ever since, and we've recorded 2 EPs. And he's like, so I just released a new song called New York City in December. And I came up to him with that in like the first week of November. And I'm like, "That's too late. I thought about it too late." And he's like, "No, it's not. Let's do it." So he's that person in my life, like my constant, and he's like family. I always joke with my husband that like I have my husband, I have my boyfriend. Paul is my boyfriend.
As long as everybody's in agreement, like,
everybody's
great.
good.
We love it. Great. Amazing. So Paul stepped in, basically was like, "You have this voice. Let me just put a spotlight on it, give you a little confidence boost around what you do and what you are capable of."
Yeah.
How did you find it within yourself to start? I mean, it's like a larger question, but like believing that.
You know, it's a cliche, but just having one person to believe in you is a lot. And sometimes you don't need more than that. And then once the music was out there, seeing the responses and what it did, like what I thought it was for a lot of people. And seeing that mirror and resonate was all I needed. And part of the reason why COVID was so hard, because we lost that ability to like feel feedback from people, right? And to feel that resonance in real life. But that's all I need.
Well, let's talk about that then, right? I feel like I am not when I was a kid, maybe I wrote songs and they're all in some cute little journal that I probably have stored away somewhere. And I've definitely thought about it. But in my current life, I am not a songwriter. I do write, but not specifically for songs. And it's a very isolating process for most, I would argue, and that unless you have a collaborator who's with you throughout that whole time, you are mostly alone, thinking, pondering, creating, writing, extracting all of that by yourself. I imagine in COVID, it was heightened tenfold in many respects, but how is that as a process for you?
Even with Paul, it still feels like a lonely process because I write my own songs and then I come to him and I show him, and maybe we continue with them and maybe we don't. But the fact that as a singer-songwriter, if you don't get independent, if you don't get up in the morning and decide to do something, nothing happens.
Right.
Every day. And it's up to you to make things happen. I think that's also true as an actor.
Oh, yeah.
But once you book the job, you're on the wheel. Things are turning. You're in inertia. Like, you're there, right? So there's really no point that happens when you're an independent singer-songwriter, right? even if things are happening, things are moving, you still have to climb up to the next thing. And that's true even for Beyonce, right? She has to wake up in the morning and say, like, what am I going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right? She's not part of a production that's already happening.
Yeah.
So, so I found this circle, this songwriting circle, which we meet once a month, and we share songs and hardships and joke about how terrible it can be or how wonderful it can be. And it's really, really important. And I think that's in part what you're trying to do with the podcast. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And in COVID, we couldn't do that in real life. So now that we're back to real life, it's like, it's a whole nother world. And I did a lot of Zoom concerts during COVID and all that. And I know that on the other side, it was meaningful, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel it from like little words on a screen. Like, so it's such a relief that we're not in that world anymore.
Are you meeting with these people in person?
Yeah, in person.
Amazing. And did that start, was it birthed out of COVID, or was that community existing beforehand, transitioned, and then came out?
No, it's pretty new.
Wow.
It started right after COVID, when it was like, okay, can we come out of our
cocoons? Yeah. Exactly. How did you find them?
My friend Amy J, who's an amazing singer-songwriter, we played a show together. It was like a singer-songwriter circle show, and the same thing that happened with you. I saw her play and I was like, that one, she's gonna be my friend. Sometimes people are scared of that and it can be off-putting, but I find that like 9 times out of 10 they're like, oh my god, somebody wants to be my friend.
Sure, but arguably also, like I'll like brush my shoulder off on this. Like, you're picking people that you want to be friends with, which has 100%. An energy to to whom you want to spend your time with, right? Like I think about that often, and we've talked about this maybe in earlier podcast episodes, and I know most of my friends know I talk about this, and I do this when I coach, but like there's the phrase, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And I've said this before on here in some episode, I'm forgetting which, that like it's not who you like the most. It's like if you work at a job that you hate your boss and you're with them for 7 hours a day, you are spending a lot of time around that energy, and that energy is going to be absorbed into one of the 5 people. Or like if you're riding a bus and you're stuck in traffic and you're sitting next to a person who is really hard to sit next to, you've been on that bus for 2 hours with this person, like that is going to be absorbed into your energy. And the average of those energies in a day really starts to weigh and manifest themselves into your body. And
100%.
Yeah. And like, what a better way than to cultivate and curate your energies if you can, by like being like, I want to be friends with you.
And I think it's really hard to, when you're in those circles and it's already like, okay, these are my friends, it's hard to get out of it, right? Or this is my job. It's hard to get out of it, right? And I think one good thing from COVID is that it allowed the possibility to just like cut everything and reevaluate
that word.
And I don't know about you, but I definitely have some friendships that have fizzled, and I let them fizzle.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, restart.
Yeah.
Who do I need around me? Who do I want around me? What kind of energy? Just like you're saying. And it was that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. I definitely had that happen, whether it was naturally or whether it was just kind of organically, or I guess those are one and the same. But, there was just this natural cadence of that season of my life with this person has ended, and there's no hard feelings around it. It's just, this is the cadence of that particular journey. And then the next one, thank you for your time in a Marie Kondo kind of way. I've learned a lot. This has been wonderful. It's just a whole new chapter that can then begin by acknowledging that this was, and it was beautiful. And here comes the next thing,
Yeah.
Kind of still on the same isolation track, even with this beautiful community that you have that meets once a month, you still have all the other days of the month, and you still have to be creating, and you're still sitting and mulling things over. And how do you find that inspiration for yourself?
Another thing during COVID is that I was completely inspirationally empty. Like nothing was coming out. The well was dry, and everything felt insignificant and not important enough to say. But again, that's changing now. And what happened during that time is I started noticing the smaller things. The smaller things became more important. The way I wake up in the morning, who I wake up with in the morning with, the way the light hits the window at a certain time. Like, these things became so much more special. And thank Goddess and the universe, it's still there. Like, so that's where I'm finding inspiration right now, in the small, in the micro. I have written about the macro a lot, but I feel like now I'm in my micro phase. That's where it is.
Was there something that drew you to focusing in that capacity, or was it just like, was there a specific moment, or was it just life happened and now this is just kind of the way that you're seeing things?
So the macro felt so terrible. Like, I felt like I had no control over my life. Everything that I had planned was immediately canceled. I know I'm not the only one. Everybody listening to this was like, are like, yes. And then the only things I could hold on to and feel like are meaningful and beautiful were the little things. So that's how it started.
And you're still finding that that's the lens through which you're viewing life for now?
For now.
Yeah. I recognize that, that can change.
100%.
So with that, when you find these small little bits of inspiration, what is your actual process of sitting down and writing?
So I'm very inspired by poetry. So it needs to be an action to say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write. Either I look in my, voice memos from some things that in passing I record to myself and be like, oh, that could totally be a song.
Do you do that? You do like micro voice notes?
Yeah, I do.
On your voice memos, or is it like in your text?
Voice memos. Okay. Yeah. I'll like talk to myself, or like I'll sing a little bit to myself. For me, music and lyrics come in usually together, or lyric first, and then, but it's not, to me, it's not really lyric first, because I look at a lyric and I'm like, oh, that's its melody. I have it immediately in my head.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
Yeah, words, I feel that words that are put together in a unique way have their own melody already.
Explain what you mean, or is there an example that you can give?
So for example, I really like poetry, and one of my biggest inspiration is a Sufi poet named Rumi. And he writes about the beauty in the little things, and his imagery is like very, I don't have the word even. It's magical, it's gentle, it's like a big hug. And sometimes I can read a line of his and have a melody already, because it's just written that way. It could be the cadence, it could be the imagery. It's usually a mix of both. And I want to sing. I don't want to read the line. I want to sing the line.
I love that. And so you find that when you are voice memoing yourself, or you see a word written somewhere that inspires you, you're literally seeing it in melody, basically, rather than just retrieving the word. Amazing. So from there, you have a bunch of these, maybe amalgamation of a bunch of words, phrases, whatever. Then what do you do?
And then my musical theater brain kicks in, whether I want it or not, and I try to think of the story.
Okay.
Or I see a movie in my mind of how every scene is in the movie of what this song is. And there's usually an overarch or a story that takes you beginning, middle, end in the story of the song.
Does it ever shift, or like once you've seen an image of that movie play out, it just is that?
Usually when I write, it could be like I could, have something cooking for a while inside me, but once I like sit down, it's like, what? It's a vomit. Comes out. Like my song "Am I Beautiful," who I wrote about my friend's journey with breast cancer. When I knew I wanted to write a song for her, but once I sat down and was like, okay, this is the moment, I feel like, like when you feel like you're about to vomit, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Once I sat down, 15 minutes and the song was out. That's it.
Wow.
So that's usually how it happens.
So it's really a percolation that eventually just comes out in like a sputter that is all of it.
Exactly.
That's kind of really lucky.
Yeah.
Until you are feeling maybe inspirationless, and then you're like, well, when am I going to feel that, rise of, metaphorical vomit
Exactly, which I
to
didn't feel at all for almost 3 years during
yeah.
COVID. And that was scary and sent me into depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
things that I hadn't really felt that deeply before in that
Yeah.
to that level. So yeah.
Did you create it all during that time, the 3 years? In a non-judgmental way, just
No,
was that
I'm trying to think
yeah.
if I said yes to everything that came along
Mm.
because I felt so inspirationless.
Mhm.
So I did things, but nothing came out of my fountain,
Yeah. Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Very much. I deeply, deeply resonate with that. I think there was a period of time, especially towards the beginning, where that, like that quote about Shakespeare, came around that was like floating around the ether about like, well, he wrote all these things during his time when everything was terrible. You know what I mean? And then it was like the guilt around me sitting and just watching Netflix for a long time
Yeah.
started to consume me in a way that was like, well, how come all these other people are now doing these Zoom readings and now they have a play that they just wrote and they just created a short film in the comfort of their home and people are doing these things and I'm just still sitting here watching Netflix and being totally uninspired by any and all of it. And I remember explicitly there was one day I was coaching. That was like the major pivot for me over the pandemic, coming off of tour that had been, shut down abruptly. And I pivoted to teaching and coaching virtually, mostly all these young artists and for monologues and singing and scene study and breaking down text and all of this stuff that was like tactical acting and arts related. And every single one of them was trying to work on their craft, but bar none, they all were struggling mentally, emotionally, spiritually, life stuff, business stuff, like all of the other stuff. And that was the light bulb for this community. It literally was. I had no inspiration necessarily for myself, but it was like there is nowhere for all of these isolated artists to go and exist and create and um process everything that's happening, and we have not given any of these artists the tools to even know how to begin with that, nor do I think I have them myself, but, like, how can we create a community so that we're at least giving people a foundation for, you know, times that are hard? And that's really where, like, the birth of this community came, like, from that of, like, "Okay, let's do something about that." But interestingly enough, that was never something that I ever thought would even at the time, it didn't feel like inspiration. It was just, like, a necessity, but hindsight's 2020, and it's like, "Oh, because I was in such a place where I couldn't do anything necessarily for my own artistry, and I was of service, I guess, for other artists who were trying to continue cultivating it for themselves. Here we are, however, I guess years later now because of it. But it is interesting to look back on that feeling of
Yeah.
not being able to access a part of one's arguably identity, which is creating,
Yeah.
you know?
And I understand the artists that had this like
For
incredible
sure.
creative spirit that took over them because and this is my theory, it's not the truth. I think people who maybe were not creating right before the pandemic or were like too busy to do what they really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then the pandemic hit, they had all this time
Mhm.
and then they had all this space to do what they wanted to do. I think people who were already in creation and feeling like they were doing what they wanted to do, which I feel like you were totally in that space and I was in that space. I was about to go on tour. I was about to play this huge worldwide music showcase, release new music. Like I had everything lined up and then boom.
Yeah.
And I'm very much a person who thinks I can affect my own reality and my my mind
Yeah.
and my spirit. Suddenly the world was like, oh yeah? Oh, you think so? Well, let me tell you
Exactly.
otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's why it hit me that way.
Yeah. This isn't like a scientifically proven theory, but I would agree you are correct. Also because for many of us who were on, say, like the hamster wheel whether it was self-imposed or whether it was the world, either or, there is a level of exhaustion and pacing that happens that sometimes we're not even aware is happening, that like when you are forced to stop
Mm-hmm.
and take stock of like all that you've done and all that you've been a part of and rest, there really is something about giving your body the breath that it has been asking for without it like yelling at you to give it to it. You just had to. And then all of a sudden your body, was like, oh, wait, this is what it means to just like exist without any of the other noise. Um, in many ways, yeah, that was a surprising gift of a really dark time to be like, well, what does my body actually need in this moment? My body needs rest, and it has literally not had rest for however many years I've been on this planet, because I've been on this hamster wheel, whether self-imposed or otherwise, that I have not been able to or given myself the gift of getting off of, because why would I? That's the whole point. Let's
Yeah.
get to the next thing. There's the next thing down the pike, but it's like actually you pivoting off that self-ascribed or other ways prescribed journey is still going to get you back on the journey, just in a different way than you anticipated.
Yeah.
Um, it's so wild to look back on it though, because when
Yeah.
you're in it, pandemic or otherwise, we all as artists go through that, these
Yeah.
periods of real isolation, these periods of real creative depletion or lack of inspiration. We talk about that on the Liz Kimball episode that we have. And she talks about the cycle of creation and how it really is this cyclical cycle, and sometimes there are parts of that cycle that are so much longer than you want them to be, but you need that in order to come back to your form of creation. I think about that often, even though it feels really icky.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being in those uncomfortable places.
Yeah.
Or maybe just putting the focus on something else and not the art. Like I put so much focus in my personal life,
Yeah.
in my love, my home. I was building a lot of new things in my personal life, and
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah.
You know?
And I would argue or imagine that actually inspired you to then look at those smaller details and be able to come back to those things that were real for you.
100%. Yes, that's exactly right.
It just
Yeah.
feeds, we forget that these other things, like the life feeds the art and the art feeds the life if you're actually listening.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I'm curious what you're working on now.
So I have this project that I'm very excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Going off the whole pandemic thing, not feeling connected to other artists and not feeling invited to anything.
Do you mean
For a
that
while.
literally because nothing was happening? Do you mean that you felt like you were outside of the thing?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that a shift from prior, like from pre-pandemic?
Yeah, because pre-pandemic there was always something. I felt like there was always, I don't know, a happening here, a happening there. But then the silence made me feel uninvited. And also coming back after the pandemic, I would see other friends doing things, and I'm like, okay, am I also gonna be invited to something?
Mm-hmm.
So I did the 21 days of meditation of abundance by Deepak Chopra. I recommend it to anybody feeling stuck. And then you invite things into your consciousness, into what you're asking from the universe, in a mind frame of abundance. There's enough for me, there's enough for you, there's enough for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I finished it, the thing that stuck with me is I want to be invited. 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 I want to be invited on a personal level. I want to be invited on a spiritual level. I want to be invited on a work level, art level, all of it. I just want to be invited. I want to be invited. I'm going to come. Invite me.
Yeah.
And I just walked around the world like, I want to be invited. I want to be invited. And then this really beautiful invitation came from this author. Her name is Susan Lax, and she's a spiritual counselor, and she's also the co-owner of Naot Footwear, which is like this global amazing shoe company. So she's like this badass businesswoman who 15 years ago did a shift and became a spiritual counselor. And she mostly works with end-of-life patients. So it could be anything, and their families. And so she started this thing called Morning Inspirations, which she would send out an email to her clients of something she wrote, a little poem, a little prose, a little story, just to help them start the day with a nice breath, right? And some photos that she would take too. And it started as like this small little thing, the little gift, and then it grew and it grew and it grew. And the list of the newsletter became in the thousands. And she got an offer over the pandemic to make it into a book. She made it into a book. It was on Good Morning America, became like the #2 selling spiritual book on Amazon, like something crazy. And then she got an offer to write another book. And she said, I don't want to write another book because I miss being with people and I miss the connection. So what I want to do is I want to find the right musician, songwriter to compose some of my words and make it into a performance, a concert, a song cycle that we can present and be in the room with people. And then she found my song, Am I Beautiful? And she found me. She came to one of my concerts and she's like, you're the person. You're the person I've been looking for. And she invited me. She commissioned me to write 7 songs. And we're going to do our first concert on March 26th here in New York. And then the idea is to take it all over the country. And it's funny. It's hard to explain what it is because people are like, is it a concert? Is it a service? Is it a spiritual experience? Well, it's kind of all of it. So I'm there. She's there. There's a band. Paul is going to be there.
Amazing.
And we're going to sing those 7 songs. And each song is like a little tool to your spiritual toolbox of what to do when you're in this space, what to do if you're feeling like this, what to do, how to live together in grief and joy and anger and beauty and all these things together. So she's going to read some of her words and I'm going to sing some of her words. And then we're going to what we call jam, is like talk about it. And some of the songs have a lot of communal singing. So whoever comes is going to be singing and anyone can sing and it's going to be great. Don't worry about it.
I'm so proud of you. I remember when you told me this and I was like, I think it feels so you, which is, I think, why it makes me really happy because it's not just like a person who's like, I love your music, make some music. You're like, no, which would be great, but but this is just so in alignment with like your energy going back to that, about like, who are you going to be spending your time creating this with? Somebody who's giving in a way that is A, cultivating community, B, giving emotional support, ways and tools of coping or existing. I think there's something very cathartic about that, what you're talking about in a process. And it feels so right that you are going to be in that. I'm so excited for you and to hear all that you're creating with it.
Thank you.
Are you able to even talk about like any of the pieces thus far or like a little how it's been creating it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've never had to completely only use somebody else's words.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's hard, but I feel like our big why is the way I like to call it, like why you do what you do is very similar. Like we both want to come from a place of awakening, healing, and love in hard places and in difficult situations and in beautiful ones. So when I see her words, a lot of the times I'm like, oh, I could have totally written that, it really resonates. And also she gives me a lot of freedom in playing around. Like I can take one piece and put it together with another piece and create something new. And she's really cool with that. So it's been, well, actually when she approached me and asked me to do this, I was like, you know what, wait a second. Let me read your book and see if anything comes up, like, the percolating thing, if anything percolates.
Yeah.
And I thought it might not, and that's okay. And I did. And like within an hour, something came up. It was like, oh, okay, it's here. I don't need to worry about it. So that's what it's been.
Are you feeling it in your body as a different way of curating, or does it feel like a similar, like just going off of what you were sharing earlier about, seeing a word or a phrase or whatever, and then it kind of just boils up in you in that way. Does it feel similarly, even though it's from a different way in?
The music that's coming out is a little different because I have no worries of it needs to be listened to on Spotify or it doesn't need to be listened to on Spotify, like it needs to be this long or that long, because what I'm thinking about is like the song cycle, the thing as a whole. We'll probably record it and it'll probably be on Spotify, but like that's not even something that I'm putting in my mind,
Right.
Like the structure might be not regular. And that's okay. And we can break it down and we can do communal singing, and a song could all of a sudden be 7 minutes because we were doing a thing, we were in the moment. So there's a lot of freedom there, which I'm really enjoying.
Ooh, I love that. I also imagine that is inspiring your own songwriting that you're doing independently. That
Totally.
I would imagine if you look back on this in the year, 2 years from now, you'll be like, oh, this was where this whole thing was morphing into this new thing that I now use and have in my own toolkit that I blah, 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 blah from there.
Yeah.
It's always such a fascinating chicken or the egg, I find, in that way. Like, what's really, like, you working the way that you were working was what inspired her to collaborate with you. But now that you're working with her, it's inspiring you to start working with yourself in a different way, right? And it's like, who's to say that which is the start, which is the end? Where does it all begin? Where does it stop? That little infinity sign that I'm just like randomly drawing in the air. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Ugh, I'm really excited for you in that. My other question would be, how do you marry this part of your creative self with the performer self? How do you feel like they work together in conjunction with each other? Have you found that it's opened up more doors for you or not? Like, what's that been?
Yeah. Well, like I said with Paul, like I think none of this would have happened if it wasn't that, that musical theater
Right.
job that I had, right? And a lot of the times I miss theater when I feel isolated and alone and lonely in trying to make everything happen alone. And I'm like, oh, I just miss being part of a company and just being and doing with other people. But the pandemic and everything else has made me very picky. And I just don't want to do everything.
Good.
But the things I want to do, I really want to do, and things that sound interesting to me, I would love to do them. But they are few and far between.
Yeah. How did you get to that selection philosophy?
I think during the pandemic, not doing anything, and then kind of slowly coming back into doing things, I said, okay, I'm starting anew. I'm going to really pick everything with I don't even know how to explain it. Like it kind of happened naturally, and then I was like, oh, I like this. I like that I'm only doing things that really resonate in my soul.
Yeah.
So what if there's less? So what? What? I don't have to be busy all the time. I could have time to have coffee with my beautiful friend Jennifer, and not feel bad about it. I don't know if you've had this of like when you take a few days or, you go have coffee that's like 4 hours and you're like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I could do this, I could do, that's.
No, but again, it feeds back. Yes, I've had those feelings all the time. The guilt around it, blah, 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 blah. But those purposeful decisions of me spending my time with somebody or a thing or an event or an experience that I want to be doing, arguably I'm going to be getting more out of that experience than me sitting at home, quote unquote, forcing myself to do something that I'm not present for. And maybe this is the procrastinator in me, knowing that I now only have X amount of time to accomplish said things that I was, quote unquote, supposed to accomplish by whose standards, unclear. But knowing that I have that time crunch is now going to put a little pedal to the metal on my urgency to get those things done and, frankly, get out of my own way. I think that's the other thing too, right? Like, I was teaching an improv class recently, and we were doing, props, the game props, where you have a prop and you have to just pretend that the prop is, whatever it is, and you don't have much time to think. And if you set the game up in a way that there's like a line and there's people having to come right after each other, you really don't have time to think if you're actively listening to what somebody said beforehand, because you can't repeat. And because you don't have the luxury of sitting with yourself and like all of these options, you just have to trust your intuition and just go and just do the thing. And there's a huge amount of freedom with trusting that your body, your instincts, your heart, your desires, everything, like it knows. And you're just getting out of your own way to let it come out. And I really do feel that if you are accepting incredible coffee invitations from strangers who want to be your friend and saying yes to it because that's really what you want to do, but you weren't the one who was forward enough to ask the person. So you just accepted and then you went and then you wanted to be there with Shira and you had a wonderful time, even though you probably should have been at home doing X, Y, and Z, but you wanted to do that. And now you have a new friend, blah, 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 blah. Then me going back home after that experience is only going to make me feel better about doing the things that I quote unquote neglected during that quote unquote time that I was supposed to. I mean, like all of the shoulds. I really do think it flows into each other, and they work hand
and
in
you're
hand.
in a way, at the end of the day, you're more productive.
Correct.
Yeah.
But also that whole word is something that like
Right.
is, like who's ascribing productivity to you and your own life choices, besides like literal deadlines of things that matter for larger reasons,
Yeah, you're really I really want to take that word out of my vocabulary in general. Like, thank you for that.
Yeah, the word should is something that that's been like my this journey of trying to remove that, because that implies that there's somebody else who's told me that this is something that must be done. If it's self-imposed, then like sei gesund, do your thing, but like
even that should create it makes you want to do it in an anxious way, in like whatever you're doing, like I should do this. Okay, let's go. It's never calm. It's never with ease. You want to do things with ease and with love, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As we wind down our time, is there anything that you wish you knew when you were beginning your artistic journey in this way? Or is there something that you are currently navigating that you would love to impart to the listener about what it means to be grappling with that thing, both or?
So, like I said, when I was in musical theater school, everybody was trying to put me in boxes and failing. And I was trying to find my box in a way. I was like, yeah, I want a box. Everybody's got a box. I want a box, And I didn't have a box. And so I was in school right before Once started. And that was like the first show I saw. And I was like, oh, there is room for me. It's not a box, but there's room. And what I didn't know that I know now is that everything that made me different was a strength and not a weakness. And I'm not regretting anything, but maybe if I would have embraced that a little more, I wouldn't have struggled internally so much and felt bad and felt like I don't belong anywhere for a little less time. Yeah. But maybe that's part of the journey, and that's okay that I went through that. So that's something that I now know, that I wish everybody knows. Yeah. That everything that makes you different, weird, awkward, is a gift. Yeah. Is a gift. And maybe you're not going to work if you're an actor, you're not going to work for a little while. But when you get that thing that is you, oh my God, it's going to be so much better than anything you can imagine. Yeah. Thank you. I know that that's something that even if you do feel that, or even if you're further in your journey and you're like beginning to accept all parts of yourself, it's always a helpful reminder to be like, there is literally nobody on this planet who is you. Literally nobody else who is you. Period. Even if you share similarities, even if there's overlap, even if things look the same or sound the same, the nuances, the differences, there's literally nobody else on this entire planet who is you. And why not embrace that? Yeah, and when you hone into that, people are like, whoa, who's this person? Who's this creature that's so unique, and embracing that? Yeah, yeah. And then that's magnetic, and then it makes the other person think about themselves, and then everybody's winning, whatever that means, just by embracing themselves as full human beings who exist in a space.
I adore you so much. Thank you for being bold and, like, telling me we need to grab coffee because I'm the friendship that has come from that has been just such a blessing, and it's been so wonderful to watch you create, inspire, live so earnestly and truthfully and vulnerably. Um, you show up in a way that is very earnest in the most wonderful of ways. And it is palpable and tangible. And I think people see that. And if anyone has yet to listen to Shira's music, do it and you will feel that. It's just really inspiring to me to have somebody like you in my life who um, literally lives and breathes consistently who they are, which is it's just wonderful. So thank you for all that you're doing.
I love you.
I love you.
I'll say that again. I love you.
Great. I love you too. Um, for anybody who is listening and they want to follow along on your journey, they want to listen to you, they want to work with you, what within your own boundaries is a way for people to get in touch?
If you're on Instagram, I'm Shira Music, and that's where you'll find everything. There's a link in bio which will take you anywhere, and DM me. Like I said, I'm up for being invited. I'm still in that headspace of just like, invite me.
Yeah.
I will probably say yes, So feel free to reach out.
It's so funny hearing you say that because you did that for me. So obviously you are taking your own advice. So just let me reflect that back to you that you are inviting others. So others will invite you as well.